So from there, I believe it is very important for us to have everyone's thoughts and on this, on what we have discussed so far. We appreciate if there's any, we open the floor for comments or questions or thoughts that can benefit any of us. Questions? Oh, yes, please, Ansri.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. I want to get the comment from Professor Dr. Muhammad Hashim Kamali with regard to how we interpret Maqasid Syariah when it becomes two choices. For example, we criminalize, the law criminalize certain action, but the law also is silent with regard to the right of marriage. I'm talking about the right of marriage. That means I'm talking about the law criminalize sexual thing for below 18 or 16, and the Sharia is silent on that. Then can we now establish, can Maqasid Sharia establish criminal exceed the cultural and all that? Can argue on that establishment, and therefore the law stands? That's how do we then do this interpretation?
Maybe I cannot give you a conclusive final answer. I'll have to look into the details, but if there is a comparison, for example, between two choices, one is geared toward dar al-mafasid, that is prevention of harm and crime and mischief to society, and the other is geared toward attractive benefit, then you give priority to fighting the mischief first. I think that that is perhaps from the Sharia perspective, you have the maqasid classified into several divisions. Like there are 6 or 7 classes of divisions of the maqasid. Some are the daruriyat, some are tahsiniyat, some are hajiyat. Others are maqasid asliya, maqasid tab'iyya. These are the primary maqasid, these are the secondary maqasid. Others are maqasid amma, they are maqasid khas. Some are general, some are particular. There are some that maqasid al-shari, the lawgiver's purposes, and maqasid al-mukallaf. Those are when you look at the entire range of this, perhaps you will be able to visualize a certain order of priority. But I think that the order of priorities is not always established by looking at the text of Sharia. When we say the maqasid of mukallaf, the maqasid, the society, the mukallafun, individuals in learned bodies and so on, they can identify what are the maqasid to fight this, or to maybe the idea of prioritization itself is a consultative matter. We are not really passing judgments in abstraction. We need to propose these and ask the learned and develop a kind of a framework after obtaining a consultative input on these issues. I think that I feel as if I'm still disconnected with your specific question. But if there is more is kind of addressed more specifically, maybe we can discuss.
Follow through from Tan Sri's question. I think a very clear example would be the decision of one of the higher courts last year, which on the issue of bin Abdullah. Do you recall that for children who are born illegitimate, less than 6 months of gestation period, and there was a dispute whether can she or he take on the biological father's name, because in practice in Malaysia, when the child is born less than 6 months, then he or she will be put by bin Abdullah, which is really not really a practice anywhere in Sharia as well. Now, there is definitely a conflict here. On one hand, one of the maqasid al-Sharia is the protection of nasab. You see, and then the argument is that you cannot put the biological father because legally the child is illegitimate and therefore cannot carry on the father's name for the purpose of protection of nasab, so that in future, he or she will, so on and so forth. On the other hand, looking at the best interest of the child, obviously she suffers if she carries on the bin Abdullah. She'll be stigmatized by the society, looked down upon, scorned upon, and if I may so, literally her life is gone. You see, so I think there's a clear conflict there. You have a clear maqasid on one hand, but on the other hand, you have all this maslahah and mafsadah that comes from the issue. So perhaps with that example, Prof can clarify further?
Those are, the rules are there that the minimum period of gestation is 6 months. And the normal period is a little bit higher. But whether that is something that is always a measure for judging the maslahah of the children, maybe these are that are two different things. I think that for establishing that framework in whether a name can be chosen, a name is not necessarily a substantive something. It can be chosen if we think that this will serve the protection of the child, given that we recognize that the facts what they are. The name should perhaps be not regarded as part of that 6 months gestation aspect. It is a kind of, but whether you recognize that as an aspect of parenthood, if there is proof that this was the issue of zina, we cannot go against that kind of situation. We have to recognize that this is illegitimate. But sometimes there is no proof of that. There is no proof that there is an issue of zina. That is what we have said, 6 months below or after is a presumption, is not a factual kind of judgment. I think sometimes these presumptions have weaknesses. We need to look at the maslahah factors of the children. And I believe that the maslahah of the child should take priority at the end of the day, yes.
Prof, I think what Tansi was saying is the conflict. We have a law, sexual engagement with a child below 16 is considered rape, statutory rape, and yet our Sharia law allows marriage before 16. So there is a contradiction between the law, our own civil law, and the Sharia law. So this is a point of contention.
So, the parliament has the law has been passed by parliament with regard to that, and therefore this is what I'm trying to establish parity. If parity is already established, then there is no need to discuss further. Follow the parity. If this is the issue of the accepting of the maqasid sharia as that, because maqasid sharia established that the law of the country will see the other
Amrul Imam Nafis. That is, the decision of the leader is effective. Another legal maxim, Amrul Imam Yarfa'ul Khilaf, that the decision of the Imam. Here we read Imam is the Ulul Amr. The Ulul Amr may be Parliament, it may be the head of state, maybe someone else, the head of judiciary or whatever. But that is something that there is a disputed situation. And you need to find which is the authoritative source. And there is a ruling by these authorities that will decide the disputed situation. But presumption and legal maxims, these are also in the nature of, generalities. Sometimes their accuracy is of questionable application to particular issues. I think the decision, the consultative decision of the learned and those who have insight into the maslaha, the benefit of children, and when they see it, maybe they find a different recommendation. And that different recommendation perhaps can be proposed to the authorities to change that situation and follow a different course.
I think I think all of us would want to probably need another discussion on this when there is a clear, when there's a clear conflict between the what do you call this, the current law and the Sharia. Is there any more questions? Okay.
Hello everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Azmi. First of all, I would like to say thank you to Kerajaan Selangor actually for all their efforts. And I have to admit, being an NGO on the ground, we do a lot of charity. But then it's because there is an outflow of people looking for it. So we do not stop that. But in my experience, looking at my data just now, we do not really do much in Selangor because we don't have to. Because Selangor is well taken care of. But hold on. However, listening to what YB was saying, I think that it's actually good to actually open up a channel so that all this money from public who is actually looking can actually go through there. But I've realized that when we wanted to do the same for zakat, because zakat was complaining, why aren't people pay more zakat? Why do people go through individual thoughts? Because the public perception was, we do not know what is their criteria when they were to select katakan miskin. Public wants to know, if you were to choose that home, we don't want to hear any more rumors like, oh, ada astro dish, don't give. Or big house, don't give. We don't like to hear that because those are rumors are not black and white, which is wrong perception. It's actually memalukan Islam at the same time. So I guess that is something that we can look, because we need to learn to improve. And that's one. So I do want to suggest, even with, I think JKM is doing also quite well where they work with Baitul Mal and Zakat to actually know where bantuan is going. Maybe that's one area. But before that, set up the criteria of this kemiskinan mana yang diberi bantuan and prioritization. We have to actually make it clear what is it. On that note as well, my question is, I think in this meeting we should actually invite Zakat and Baitul Mal to come in. They don't come. They're here?
They are representatives here. Yeah.
They're representative.
Yeah.
Good. So that's one, because I think it's important to hear from them as well. Pastu, the thing that I wanted to share about is Puan Dayang punya presentation. I really like it. It was very clear. I would like to share that in Ramadan, due to Children Without, we created a team where we have identified, with the help of JKM punya PPK over in PPR flats, where we identify more than 50 homes. So at 7:15 p.m. during Ramadan, maknanya dia few more minutes before buka puasa, so we call up randomly of these homes and we ask them to take photo of what they are eating during breakfast. So they cannot lie because the food is already there. And from children without, we were a bit afraid that what we see is whether they are not eating well and things like that. But surprisingly, and alhamdulillah, food is enough. But these are the kind of things that we NGO do, because we need to barge into people's home, look into their fridge, you know, and all social conduct went out the drain. But we would like to actually share that the main problem when we look into the food and we saw that, oh, they eat just the same as us, was food science. They actually have questions when we ask, why do you buy from outside? You know, they don't have this knowledge as much, especially families who do not cook earlier on. Like, one of my favorite question is from a 32-year-old mother with 3 children, and she asked, macam mana nak tahu bihun tu dah masak? How do you know that noodle is already cooked? And the thing is, because we really wanted to know why aren't you cooking, because we were trying to find out if you do a food bank, people do food banks nowadays, and we put in noodle and they don't use. So we wanted to know why. So is it the ingredient inside the food bank ke apa ke? But this kind of question is valid if they don't know. Atau they had bad experience with eggs, like tak pandai pilih telur, setiap kali beli busuk. And I don't blame them or things like that. I mean, we laugh behind, but then again, we have to find a way on how to bring this education. And one of the thing, a grandmother who was taking care of their children was saying, long time ago, the TV program actually shows step by step about cooking techniques. Not suddenly was blast off and then everything dah campak inside, everything was put inside. These small things do matters in our society, really. I guess last week with YB Fahmi Fadil, with Food Aid Foundation that I was called upon, was talking again about food preparation techniques. To have question macam mana nak tahu bihun dah masak, it's sad, but it's real. And I think we have to look into that. And this is part of giving the rod, I think, punya system. But the question that I nak tanya Puan Dayang is actually, what about the institutionalization punya progress? Are we going to really push into that area of deinstitutionalization to reduce the number of orphanages and things like that? So I really, really want to know, because as much as I love all of the agencies and all of the rumah-rumah under the government, I think we don't have enough resources and time to train and retrain our officers and pegawai dalam rumah-rumah perlindungan kita ni, which I think that the one way out is a deinstitutionalization. I would like to have a small comment on that. And before I forget, kalau nak tanya YB on the Selangor part, was no, I really love Selangor punya program. Every time dia kata dia orang Selangor, I always say, can you just buka Peduli Rakyat punya web page and then just look into it and they'll give. But one of the suggestions that we want for NGO, we do not do more than 6 months. Maknanya dia, if we do provide bantuan for them to get up again, we just put a capping limit of 3 months to 6 months. And what we think is good enough for them to stand on their own. If they still don't want to and they cannot, we actually do blacklist them. Actually in Facebook, we have a blacklist Facebook name list with photos of, so anybody nak tolong aja, we say this is a blacklisted item, person, so we don't. Maybe that would help actually. Thank you.
Terima kasih Tuan Syed. On the deinstitutionalization, susah betul nak sebut, yeah. So that's why in Malaysia actually we don't use the word deinstitutionalization. Instead we all use the word family-based care. So with regard to this, yes, the government is actually really orang kata interested to be orang kata implementing this. We have been actually working together with orphan care dengan Lumos, and kalau Tuan Syed were privy to this ataupun you were invited to some of the Albania program, actually we do have orang kata annual program dengan Lumos, dengan orphan care, to actually train people on how to go about to introduce family-based care dekat Malaysia ini. Okay?
Family-based care ni termasuk caring,
Yes, foster caring, and also what do you call this? Anak angkat dengan, what's the other one? Adoption. Yes. Oh, my boss is here. He's just waiting for me. Okay. So far, we are probably looking into if it is possible to orang kata do a pilot project. We do not think that in Malaysia langsung ataupun no longer do we have institution, because you have to take into consideration there will be children out there who may need a place where they all can remain, because they may not have orang kata immediate family. So what do they do to them? You can't simply put them on the roadside, yeah. So yes, but
memang betul. I don't think we should stop
Yes,
it or
yes.
close it altogether.
Yes.
But family bliss care ke foster care ke is something that I wanted to see where public can actually enroll themselves and be trained and open for that lah.
yeah. What we are looking into is like, if you do this, we have to address, for example, the pool of people that can be foster carer, for example, ataupun those people who are ready to be adoptive parents. Remember I was saying just now, tiga category that we have to look into, right? YB, tadi Dayan dengar, you were saying that about OKU. I'm so sorry, I used the term OKU. There is a need to actually to separate them. But actually, JKM, they have a special category. For example, those yang ada hearing disability, autism, learning disability, for example. So actually, they have quite a few number of different groups, if I'm not wrong. So maybe.
I know
Okay.
there's different groups, but
Okay.
feedback from down there
Yes.
is that it's not working that way. And it's not sufficient, and because you see like the hearing aids, and then we have the physical disability. So they are not happy with it. They're not happy with it. They say that we should have separate, whereby specialized according to their needs, not within what they need. I got one paper, inshallah, one ITM, UNICEF has prepared. I think I will share with you all. I just want to ask you about this. You were saying that all children in Malaysia born, they should have a birth certificate. Yeah. But in actual fact, I got right now a few cases whereby they cannot go to school because pendaftaran the problem. Selagi tak selesai pendaftaran, they can't get into school. And recently I got a report. His child, mother is a Sabahan, and then because there's the incomplete registration or something like that problem, she dropped out of school, and soon uncle dia nak suruh kahwin. Because she feels hopeless, I cannot go to school. So I think you all have to look, and also the stateless children, and also those children, the father, they go and marry in Thailand, they come back, and then the child is not registered and all that. Those are special categories that, or else we have coming up.
YB, masalah tu sama lah. Tapi every time when we put inside, okay, so the practical reality that will happen, it will be, it's not JKM, you have to ask Kementerian Pendidikan, and then pendaftaran akan masuk. Jadi
Kita minta Kementerian Wanita bawa kepada KDM.
I rasa kalau kita boleh minta daripada Kementerian Wanita, yang Aina ialah semua kanak-kanak yang masuk rumah kanak-kanak tu automatically baby foundlings atau semua kanak-kanak dalam rumah kanak-kanak JKM tu patutnya terus tu dapat warga negara, terus tu apply go out for adoption. I think that one would reduce their own burden in it, because the best place for a child is at home. Jadi I think kalau they settle belah, minta maaf yang Puan Dayang, Mr. Chua, love you guys very much, I'm just being honest here, kalau dalam rumah kanak-kanak tu kita selesaikan warga negaranya, which they still have to go to KDN, I think that would actually solve half of our adoption and baby selling problem. Thank you.
The problem will be solved when KDN is found by a woman. Oh, yes.
I think we need to establish outside Malaysia, because if any children, like say, born in Australia or America, they become automatic, irrespective of what. It's whether Malaysia wants to adopt it. Once you do adopt it, then there is no more discussion about all these activities. So I think this is the move that we have to move from one aspect to another. I think I would have accepted then the responsibility of the country. If anybody born in the country
Tan Sri, it is actually in 1965 that Tun Razak inserted article under his premiership that Article 15A was inserted in the Federal Constitution to provide the special circumstances whereby children who are foundling or without citizenship be given citizenship, but it's administratively not done. You see, and now we are awaiting 5 federal court decisions. I think this month, isn't it, Gillian? It's been postponed 4 times already. So hoping to put a stop to all this, Although if you ask me, it is just an administrative matter. It's a question of policy, whether you want to acknowledge that all children born in Malaysia, all children being in Malaysia, all children having a parent who is a Malaysian, but and a mother who is not, be recognised as Malaysian citizens. And we have that in Article 15A. It is constitutionally safeguarded already. It's just a question of implementing it.
May I respond?
This is a very
Okay, I'd like to answer this from Cik side first. Let me put it this way: family-based care definitely is a new policy. Okay, it is not only limited to children, but actually the concept is much wider. It's for even when we are talking about older persons, we are talking about persons with disabilities. We do think as Malaysian family is always the best setting to take care of the vulnerable one. Okay, we want that kind of social support to be in place, but because it's a new policy, so therefore we are starting with children first. Okay, let me put it this way, Cik Said, we are so worried that sometimes maybe we are too cautious. Okay, we know how serious it is when we send the child back to the family. Okay, in the first place, while children are being pushed out from the family, there's a reason. Okay, so to send back, we need to think twice. If there's any problem, we need to resolve that social issue first, then only you can send them back. Okay, but we want those kind of social support to be around. Okay, if the parents is there and able to be responsible, we need to support them. This is in the future what the government is supposed to do. Okay, and therefore for this particular case, Lumos, as what Dayang mentioned just now, Lumos and Orphan Care have helped us to conduct a pilot study in Negeri Sembilan. We combed through the whole Negeri Sembilan on all those children in the orphanages, and then we want to know if they can be, what's the reason why they are there, who's their parents, are they able to take them back? If they want to take them back, then how can we assist them? And at the moment, we are kind of stuck there at the moment because we are so worried, because if we send them back, how are we going to send them back? Who should we train? And then how should we make sure that they can go back to their respective home and safely? That is the most important thing. Yeah. So that at the moment we are in that crossroad at the moment. We wanted to do that, but we are quite worried about that. Yeah. So that's why we start to main mata with UNICEF. We want UNICEF to be with us. Okay, we want to have a stronger team. We want to have all those kind of international technical support. We want to make sure that it is not just the government wanted to do it, NGO wanted to do it, but we have some international bodies as well to be with us. Yeah, so that is for that particular part. We really hope that we can make it. Okay.
Amjad, you would like to say something about this? Any more? Oh, there's 2 more questions. Yeah, Altaf?
Actually, just a short one, but it's following what Syed has talked about just now, and it's the role of institutions as in agencies. We're talking about addressing needs, and you mentioned something on zakat. Now, Malaysia is well known globally on having a fantastic system on collection of zakat, and even Baitul Mal has a significant amount. Now, what I'd like to throw to everyone is somehow the discourse when we're talking about systems of protection, putting platforms in place, but what is the role of religious organizations, institutions that actually the public have a lot of have high esteem towards. Now, what you've mentioned just now, that people are now wanting to move away from paying zakat to the state, but wanting to choose NGOs instead, or even going out of the country, is a sign of perhaps we need to relook and maybe we need to strengthen that trust. And how do we do that? Could there be better collaboration between the state and religious institutions? Could we strengthen it in a way, not just mere giving of money, but how distribution is being done and programs are in place? Is there room for discussion in this? I think that's
Sorry, I just Altaf punya tu kan was like not only just money tau, it's even skills or bilik sewa kosong for temporary. You know, there's so many things, resources actually from the public, right? But we don't know, there's no channel to provide and verification whether it's safe. So I totally understand that as well. But we don't have even a first line also of sharing of resources from every aspect. Even tengok Job Street, Job My and all that, right? I do not see any of my homelessness go through that system because there is, they find it's difficult, and I do agree lah, it's not so interactive lah. But it's a way, there's a way lah, like Altaf just mentioned. Thank you.
One, I think it's also the purpose of this meeting. Specifically, we really need to come up with ideas on integration of zakat and social protection, at least from intellectual point of view before implementation. It's big missed opportunity when we have all these fragmentations in the government. The government is acting as a charity organization across many programs, and then you add to it as well the zakat that is a charity, and then you add to it layers of NGOs. Just to share with you one number, like you mentioned 287 million that was spent, but on social protection in 1 year, it's about 26 billion ringgit a year on money transfers in federal government. That's a huge amount of money. All it takes to cover children from 0 to 2, pregnant mothers, all our senior citizens, to cover them with 500 ringgit for senior citizens, 200 ringgit for pregnant mother, 150. Another cash transfer for kids to go to school, everyone, it will cost only 10 billion ringgit, not the 27. But because you have too many fragmented programs, that's where we have, I think, if we can pull out everything together, and again, this is something that it's in our tradition, and Sayyidina Umar Khattabi used one approach that covers the vulnerable groups all together. It will cost us less. I will share one issue. I might be totally wrong, but here we have people will correct me like a prof. It's my understanding of zakat. It's year to year. We pay 2.5% year to year money. That's it's year to year. If we take Bank Negara, for instance, they have year to year, starting from the beginning of the year, end of the year, $100 billion US. So if we put like this is year to year money, it will bring 2.5 billion US dollar, which is about 10 billion ringgit, if they pay zakat. And 10 billion ringgit, it will cover every group I said, children, senior citizens, scholarship for and pregnant women, everyone in the country. So again, like the issue we face is the fragmentation. We have too many NGOs, good-hearted NGOs. Government is acting across many programs. You cannot count them. You have zakat. So where I think Malaysia should start thinking, my view, I might be wrong, is how we can consolidate, create one model that everything will be channeled and then distributed across all vulnerable groups.
Sir?
Yes, I think that to fight poverty, this is not confined to zakat. The wealthy in every society have a responsibility. And I think this is a well-established concept in Sharia. There are now ideas, for example, crowdfunding, for example. This will be an excellent idea. Child protection and crowdfunding, I think that those who can afford might extend, a helping hand. Then there is a possibility also to establish a waqf, cash waqf fund. Cash waqf, and that can be in terms of, goods, and it can be also a cash. And nowadays we have established methods how they can be organized and geared towards certain objectives. Thank you.
Just one more. The gentleman over there, I'm not sure where you're from. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Christopher. I'm from Khazanah Research Institute. I just want to respond on the point about family-based care, which was brought up by Mr. Chua and also Puan Dayang. And I think the thinking is that it's not just for orphans and all that, but it's also broader in terms of elderly care and child care. So in Khazanah Research Institute, we've been looking at the numbers a little bit. So in terms of child care, for example, number of children that actually are they are sent to registered childcare is actually very, very small. It's about 3% at most, based on our calculation. And for elderly care, it's also about the same percentage. So that means looking at the care space, actually family-based care is already there. In fact, some of the incentives that are in place to increase formal care, to increase the number of registered childcare centres have not been very effective. And I echo YB's point about the need to evaluate and assess some of these incentives and programs that are in place. So my question actually on this family-based care is about policy conflict. One is that I know the ministry also set a target to increase women's labour force participation rate. And we know that family-based care, most of the time, these are actually done by women. So how do we reconcile the new policy for family-based care and the policy to increase women's labour force participation? And the second area of conflict is that some of these programs are in place to increase registered childcare. For example, we give the tax deductions to private companies to set up childcare centres in their offices. I mean, are these programs going to be rolled back? I mean, what's the thinking right now in terms of, I mean, we have a whole range of, as I said, programs to increase formal care, and now we are talking about family-based care.
Let me put it this way. I don't look at it as contradictory kind of thing. Okay, first of all, yes, Ministry of Women, we do want to increase the women workforce participation. Okay, that's how we think women have that independency, and on top of that, you make the economy much better. The women's right kind of thing will be all covered in that sense. Okay, but what I want to say is, yes, I do agree with you. At the moment, that's why we always argue along that sense that generally Malaysian, we are still, our family unit is still intact. Okay, we are very lucky, and we want to maintain that. Okay, but at the same time, we are looking at on the rate is getting higher and higher. We see there's a lot more orphanages out there that's not registered. We see there's a lot of all these old folks homes that they keep setting up, and it's not registered as well. And that when we talk about this family-based care, we're talking about how can we, in that sense, don't encourage the Malaysian in the future to send their either disabled children or their old folks or the children to all those orphanages or any kind of all those institutions kind of setting. But we're talking about, in that sense, for instance, when we talk about childcare, right? We encourage quality childcare industry activities. So we are talking about the economy actually can provide, but they are just caring for the daytime, and whenever the parents come back, then the children will be with the parents again. We don't encourage people just send out and then totally export, and then what, right? After, I mean, that is all the institutional part. In fact, when we talk about a very stern kind of definition, even sending our school to all those boarding school is considered as institutions because it breaks up that whole relationship between parents and children. Yeah, so in the West, they are no longer really doing that anymore, but we are still. So, but we are not, definitely, we are not going to that. We are very much talking about orphanages or even old folks home kind of thing. And if it is possible that the market can provide some certain services, we can, in that same time, the service are being provided by the market, but families are still bearing their responsibility.
So just a quick one. I mean, in terms of the registered childcare and quality care, so we have been talking to some of the childcare operators as well. So for example, right now there is a structural problem in the industry because on the demand side, because of the wage profile of the households, the childcare operators cannot charge a high fee. But on the other hand, the childcare operators cannot charge a fee that is too low because otherwise the business cannot sustain. So what some of the childcare operators are doing is that they actually do not follow the regulations in terms of the ratio, because that's the only way for them to survive. So even with the registered childcare center, the question of quality, and I think there is a need to look into this structural problem in the industry.
Definitely agree with you. Yes, currently those that registered with JKM is only about 4,002, which is ridiculous. It is not possible. Okay, it should be more. Okay, even school itself is about 10,000, and schools child enrolled in the school is much higher than all those childcare center. Childcare industry is rather primitive in Malaysia, and we have been trying to convince the government that we need to invest more. Government should actually put in more resources. Until to date, we are not successful yet. So hopefully, with the new government, we manage to convince the government that the government would spend more on this particular industry so that it will be more healthy.
Okay, last two questions. Villa first, and then the gentleman over there.
Hi everybody, good morning. This is a fantastic discussion. My name is Villa. I head the research unit at IMAN, but in a previous life I was an anthropologist in Sabah. And actually I'd like to take our conversation back there for a little bit. I do understand, I think YB and members of the government have brought this up a lot about really looking at irregular or undocumented children. In my particular field, we refer to them as irregular because I think the circumstances in which we document children is incredibly irregular. But my question is this: in a place like Sabah, the socio-political sentiments impact a lot of how the state decides on how children are treated and attended to in the long run. The fact of the matter is there is a massive hierarchy of deservedness when it comes to dealing with children, especially so far away from the center. And I posed several questions to our speakers today. How much of our centralist view of, being in the center in Putrajaya really impacts children so far away in a place like Sabah? My work was conducted mostly on the East Coast for years. I worked on places like Sandakan and Lahad Datu, even during the incursion. And in fact, the first victims of circumstances are always the children, right? They hold the least social currency given the scenarios. So when it comes to a place like Sabah, the state government has always been incredibly sensitive in paying attention to the sort of on-ground politics about rights, about position of the multiple ethnic groups in Sabah itself. And that being said, hierarchies are then put in place for children who either are born to incredibly poor indigenous families living up in the mountains or irregular families living in the coast. How then does the federal government, how will the federal government then find ways to conflate policies, right? Identify policies that seem redundant in the eyes of Sabah to some extent, and find ways to really deal with it, because I see this as a cultural detachment. Yeah, thank you very much.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. My name is Wan Kasim from the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia. Firstly, thank you for the invitation and thank you to the presenters for the speeches. I'm glad that several participants and YB also referred to the issue of statelessness and irregular children. I believe more attention needs to be dedicated to this segment of children. They remain invisible. They are deprived of various human rights. When we talk about human rights, it's for all. So for children of Malaysian citizens and also children who are non-Malaysian citizens. So a lot of the policies that I mentioned, they do not address or they do not adequately address, if at all, these children. For instance, undocumented migrant children, refugee children, stateless children. They have extreme difficulty in accessing education, formal education, in accessing healthcare. So I believe in the spirit also of the SDGs of leaving no one behind, and also in the context of Islam, I think we would be remiss in our task of addressing the rights of children if we did not pay greater attention or due attention to these children. And I hope that the office of the DPM, in her very commendable effort of coming up with this roadmap on of children well-being, to also take this into account. The principle of human rights is for all should be of utmost what you call primacy, and it is in the best interest of the child, of all children. The principle of the best of the applies to all children, and I also believe that it would be in the interest of the nation to to pay more attention to this, because if these children remain invisible and if they continue to be deprived of their rights, it will what you call perpetuate more problems for the nation. Thank you.
To address Villa's questions on Sabah.
Well, let me put it this way. Okay, let's. I know there's a different various name we call it, but just call it stateless children. Okay, with all sorts of so-called status kind of thing. But let me put it this way. Yes, when we talk about the principle of the best interest of the child, this is the basic principle that we are holding on, and it is a general principle within the Child Act itself. Yeah. So when the government talking about children, we are not talking about only Malaysian children. It's about all. Okay. So let me put it this way: that the foundation is, yes, the principle is applied to all. Yeah. And then let me look from the perspective. Let's say we talk about SDG. Whenever Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development, whenever we talk about women, then they will say, oh, okay. When we talk about women, SDG is so-called Goal 5. People will always only look at gender, Goal 5, that's it. But the answer actually is no, because gender or even women issues is not just about gender issues. The first goal, for instance, we talk about poverty, right? Women are always the first to be the victim as well, and children as well, in that sense. So in that sense, what I want to say is social issues, it encompasses all. It is not only locked in at some particular area only. Yeah. So that's why we come back to this federal government and state government relationship. Okay. Again, yes, high hopes that Ministry of Women to be championing all these things, and since we said that best interest of the child is the key, but never forget that Ministry of Women at the same time is only another line ministry. Okay. Which when we talk about status, then it involves KDN and MKN. Yeah. So the federal government is set up in that sense is because there's always check and balance. Okay, there's some certain particular interest from the so-called nation, and there's some international politics that they need to juggle with as well. Yeah. So looking from a perspective, yes, we are all together. But looking from the country's perspective, and sometimes even let's say international politics, don't have to go far. For instance, when we talk about ASEAN, right? Myanmar and us, we need to keep the good relationship. So all those kind of things they need to take into consideration. And come back to slightly closer, Sabah and Semenanjung, right? Again, the political will is very important. Okay, even if the federal government wanted to do something, would the state government would allow all those kind of things to happen? Okay, because of the local Sabah political environment. So we are talking about a very complicated kind of relationship, and how are we going to juggle with all these kind of matters? Definitely, we if it is possible, we want the best only to happen for the children. Yeah, but circumstances until today shows that we have some certain difficulties that we haven't really resolved yet. Their education, their health, definitely is all these big issues that we need to look into. But as I always told Dr. Amjad, and even last time with this Dr. Victor, okay, Dr. Victor is now in Bangkok. I always said the same thing, how much I wish that UN body would have one particular UN country, that whenever we have all these issues, then we can send all these people there, so that we won't have all this problem. People want to get into a conflict, is not of our, we cannot do anything if Myanmar want to get into an internal warfare or all those kind of issues. But the problem is we have to suffer the consequences. And if people keep coming in, how are we going to address this issue? That is another perspective that we need to face. Until, at least from Ministry of Women, we do not have an answer, but definitely as a country, I think we need to have a stand on this. Yeah. So again, we have a new government, we have new hope.
Okay. So I think with that we conclude our first session of interactive. I guess we all know that we all learned that there is a need to relook on all the programs and to re-strategize so that the working relations between ministries will be enhanced and a new strategy will be. We will have a short break and we'll see each other in 10 minutes. Okay, thank you.